Callie, sister, I am
Hello.
so happy to have you here on Female Frequency Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I am good today. I think you're a little light in my heart right now because what you're doing, talking about your artwork and the way that you tell your storytelling to really um, talk about some hard things, social justice issues, environmental issues. Um, I just think we can help other creatives really understand their truth from how you've been able to do it.
Thank you. It's such a process, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, that's one of my mottos, and I'm sure it is for so many other people. You got to trust the process.
hmm
Wow. And today, as so many of us, I mean, I am stoked today, but I definitely have a boulder on my shoulders just where we are in our political climate, and stress blocks creativity.
Yep,
It's no
absolutely.
good. It's no good.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling it right now a lot. I was just telling you before we got on, I'm really feeling it this morning that it kind of like it almost like blows out my like wiring. Like it's like it just like frazzles me and then it becomes very hard to think. And so, sometimes it's figuring out how I can sort of deal with what's coming. And I definitely have a lot of times where it's figuring out how I can tune it out so that I can actually be creative.
Yeah. Tune that out and tune back into yourself.
hmm
Well, how was your trip to Thailand? I loved Thailand for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful. It was my second time in Thailand. So the first time I was there was all the way back in 2007. And at that point I was in the middle of my raft years. So we had done 2 years coming down the Mississippi and I was preparing for the Hudson journey and the sort of reinvention of what those rafts would be. And I was so inspired by kind of everything about Thailand, like from the sea to the city centers, and like the way that like so many thousands of hands had like come together to create Bangkok in this in some places in a very handmade way. Um, and that just like, I just felt like I needed to memorize that language like in my bones somehow, and it ended up informing one of the rafts quite a lot and one of the drawings that I did. And so this time going back for me, it was so many years later, but a lot of it was about sort of bringing back that work and just saying like, "Hi, thank you. Like here's all the ways that you guys have influenced me."
Oh, that's nice. Bringing it back to your inspiration and like a moment of gratitude.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. And did you come out of there thinking about a new series, just this like from this last trip, or a new
Well, I did a
something
little
else in the
series while I
middle?
was there actually. I did two series actually while I was there because I was there for a little bit. So I did a little residency with Hello Print Friend, which is the
Okay.
new print studio up in Chiang Mai. And yeah, I worked, it was very kind of just like inspired by the space and the place and the temples up in Chiang Mai and the sort of um Chiang Mai itself is a really dense city center, but just also kind of looking at natural forms and some of the outskirts of the city, and drawing those. I did a series of prints from that. And then I also collected a lot of materials locally and then worked on a series that I've been working on for a couple of years called the Idaphones, which is sort of a nod to actually an older woman artist. And kind of she had this project of visualizing sound and she called them Idaphones. And so I loved that name and I sort of named this series after her and after that project where it's this sort of series that you'll see that's like kind of paper cutouts on like wood and various objects, and a lot of it for me is about the way that my pattern making is in a sense, sort of feels like the crystallization of different sound and form. So that was another series I worked on there.
Yeah, it just how you're blending those. It's like a blending of the senses to me. And
Yeah.
I just Synesthesia. I just did a road trip through, I call it the old lady gang of the art world. I just went to New Mexico and
Oh,
visited
great.
Flower. Yeah,
Oh,
went to go see,
Judy.
yes.
Yeah.
And Georgie O'Keeffe. And I was talking to this Nancy Holtz Foundation too.
Cool. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Judy, I saw that you answered her question, what if women ruled the world?
Hmm. Yeah, Judy and I actually during the pandemic quite a lot. We had like such a moment. We're still in touch, but during that time we were in touch a bunch and I just really felt kind of adopted by her in that moment. She would call me like her art daughter. And there's a few of us, but it was such a special kind of thing to feel that from her because, you know, yeah, I mean for all the reasons.
All the reasons, I mean, she's an art mom to so many of us.
So many. Yeah, absolutely.
And entering
Also,
like,
I think showing me the ways that I'm an art mom too. It was like becoming her art daughter sort of showed me the ways that I'm an art mom.
yes, because like she is an art grandma to so
Mhm.
many others.
Yeah.
So, oh, what a great torch to feel inside.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, that is insane. I got to tell you, you were a big inspiration for me during the pandemic because that's when I did a workshop with you and the Million Person Project, and
Yes.
where you were sharing more about your interest in storytelling and how it was informing your work more.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how storytelling really maybe opened you up a little more?
Yeah. Everyone else always knew I was a storyteller before I did. When I opened up this sort of chapter of my life, everybody was like, "Oh, duh." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they were like, "Honey, the stories have always been in your drawings. They've always been in the installations and in all the work. But somehow I wasn't really kind of seeing it that way. But I had a very, very big transformational moment where I had an experience during of my mom passing away actually, where I was in Istanbul and I woke up from a series of dreams and I knew that it was my mom passing away and I just said, okay, I'm just gonna wait for my sister to call because there's nothing I can do. I just felt that. And on that morning, I met this woman, and she said, "My work in the world is to help people tell." We were at an environmental conference, and she
Okay.
was like, I help people tell their personal stories within their work, like environmental movements, so that we can become more present and understand each other better and trust each other more while we're building these movements, and so that we can put more power into the work that we're doing. And I just this light bulb came on for me, and I kind of felt like, my mom had been, I mean, the history of my family was so intense for me, and I had never talked about it.
Mm.
And I knew I couldn't do it by myself because it was just too hard. And so I grabbed Heather Box and I said, "Hey, I have to work with you. I have a story to tell." And it started this long, long, years long collaboration whereby I started to share my personal family history in the context of talks. And then that sort of expanded once I could stand on a stage and talk to people about the places that I'd come from. Suddenly, then it was like now it's out. Now I can speak
Yeah.
about it. Now it's part of my life, not just this kind of buried secret. And then that led to me being able to sort of explore it more deeply in my kind of large form works, like a installation I have called the Medea, which is like a depth exploration of that. Um, and then that actually really opened up narrative writing for me. So that's where I'm at right now.
Ah, wow. I feel like, are you going to do narrative writing to write your script for your film? I mean,
All of the above. Yeah.
you're so diverse. And I just think you're also a testament to all of those gallery owners that have shooed away young artists for saying that they're too diverse, and they're not disciplined enough because, I mean, you started wheat pasting and doing immersive installations like your raft. And look at you. I mean, you're in the New York Museum of Modern Art. You're in the Tate Modern. I mean, you really, creativity should not just be shoved into one box.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a line there between kind of, I think the question for me is the container strong enough to hold your voice?
Mm,
And so and so for me, I started doing the portraits, and at that point I really was like ringing that bell of like kind of really forming that way of working, of really that body of work that body of work went on for almost 20 years. And that's that sort of first body of work that people really understood as, okay, this is you. And what I found personally was that once I had built that incredibly strong container to hold my voice, it was sort of from there that I kept going, okay, what about here? What about here? And each time, it's things shift and wobble and you're like, "Oh my God, what's going to happen? Is this going to work even?" Which is like where I'm at right now, big time.
you're not alone, sister. Oh my gosh, you're not alone. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I think really embracing that diversity helps too with just remembering what inspires.
Well, for me, I think that, and I bet this is true of so many artists, that where I live and die is at the
Yeah.
point of learning. That like I really understand that term arts and sciences,
Yeah.
like how it often gets lumped together. And it's because I feel like at our truest expression, we're exploring. It's always at the question, our minds are at the question. And so for me, I like to sort of keep there where you're like, well, okay, what if this? Okay, what if this floated and traveled? What if this became a home? What if a community gathered around this? What if this were a narrative story? What if it were for kids? What if it's over and over again, just asking, asking, asking. And that's sort of the thing that keeps my creative spark alive.
That's huge. I mean, that's such a curiosity entry into it. I mean, plus critical thinking. You're just not accepting. It's like you're not accepting just the one.
Yeah, well, let's see. I'm like, do I have critical thinking? I honestly
Oh,
feel like critical thinking for me is like last. It's almost like get that out of here. Like, don't come too soon. Don't you get it? You're not welcome. Do you know what I mean? At the beginning, it's like,
because it's heady and not hearty, or what?
yes, well, because critical thinking is about limitation, right? Critical,
Mm,
and I mean, I would be a liar if I said I didn't have it in early. I just know that like an overdose of critical thinking will kill you where you stand.
I love it. I love it. Help these artists.
And so, yeah, I think that it's so much about this kind of that unquestioning at first. Okay, here's an example.
Okay.
I feel I feel like this might be an artist's way thing. You know the artist's way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Classic, right? But I remember it from when I would first start to, so when I would first start to make drawings and I draw from a lot of references, right? So I would be going to the library, pulling things, taking photographs, da, 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 piling up. Before I would start a drawing, I would just make like a reference pile of like anything that could be. And one of the things that I felt like this was such a good lesson for me is that if I felt like maybe this should be in the pile, no question. No question. Do never edit that. Never edit that impulse. It doesn't matter if it's a picture of a fucking ice cream and I'm drawing a war zone. I don't care. I don't question the impulse. And that for me was so like empowering and important to be like, look, later on, we're going to question whether this makes sense, whether it works. We're going to be cutting things out. We're going to be doing all of that. But in the beginning, zero, nothing. Every impulse gets honored. And I
Yeah.
and I think that that's actually really important for a lot of creative processes.
Well, then I'm just going for it. Where do you think these impulses come from? Like, where do you think that comes from?
Oh goodness, you really want me to answer that?
Yeah, I do. I want to get into it.
Okay, honey. Well, I feel the thing that a lot of people
Yes.
feel. I think that there's an intuitive, when you hear people talk about spirituality, so often we're circling around these same subjects, and I think it's because there's sort of a felt sense of it.
Yeah.
And so I have this feeling. I'll tell you, once I had this dream, and the dream was that I had a hole about the size of a Tootsie Roll, and it was called my uru for some reason in the dream. That's what it was called, which turns out that does actually mean hole in like a very specific kind of old language. This is my little hole in the universe. And in the dream was like through it, you can go back out, right? And you can sort of move forward and backward in space time. You can all the bets are kind of off. You sort of re-immerse back into the infinite, kind of through this tiny little perforation. Um, kind of in the, I don't know what, in the fabric of self and something. And for me, I'm like, that's kind of my closest explanation, is that it sort of feels like that we do the thing where we sort of individualize out of the greater whole, and then somehow and in some ways and in through some practices and through some forms of allowing, we kind of just like bloop, get back like for a second. Either we go back out or we let it in, but somehow the sort of membrane between the greater whole and the singular I becomes kind of permeable. That's what I think happens.
Can we make a film about that? I mean,
Definitely. I
yeah,
mean, all my films are about that, aren't they?
yes. I mean, I'm definitely seeing the raft now and through a different lens, like that emotion and like the journey, the ride to
Yeah.
go to get to the permeable, like from the hole into there, into
Yeah.
where we are, taking the unseen and bringing it to the scene.
Definitely. I mean, that was also one of the second phase of the rafts. How that really started was I had a dream. It was like a lake, and there was a dog, and he had like the lead rope this incredible crazy looking raft in his mouth, and he was swimming toward me. And I was like, "Yes. Oh my God, I need that. The most incredible. I have to go there." And I was like, and then I woke up and I was like, "God damn it." And it was like I didn't get to it. And there's one way to get to it. And you know what it is. You have to build it.
You have to build it.
Woke up too soon. Now you got to build it.
Gosh, I call that like the frequency. The female frequency was telling you what you got to do. Like, there
Yeah,
you go.
definitely.
Go on that journey, that creative journey.
Yeah.
Wow, good for you. And thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Wow. So, with your, can we talk about your process just a little? Because, I mean, you got to get up close and personal. You got to, I mean, your lines are so intricate. Where, like, let's talk about your discipline and like your creative process. How do you get up in there? You do like pen and pencil? Like, what after
Depends on
you?
what I'm doing. But let's just start at the block prints, because that's one that you, when you say lines, that may be what you're referring to. So with those, I, start with a subject, start with taking pictures and making sketches and sort of gathering inspiration. And then, nailing the block to the wall, I get in there with charcoal.
Yeah,
Well, first I'll draw a bunch of different versions and sort of feel what feels alive in my sketchbook. And then I'm getting in there with charcoal. Then I'm refining it with marker, just Sharpie actually. Just get in there, and then I start carving it. And that is one of those processes that takes like weeks and months, because it's
absolutely.
such an intensive thing, which is why there are only actually so few of those portraits. Even though even though I've done them for many years and there are a lot of them, there ultimately is a pretty limited number
Mm,
because of the intensity of the process. And you'll see it's like pretty rare to see like linoleum block prints on that scale, like some of the kind of massive ones that are 10, 12, 15 feet tall.
yeah.
Um, that, it's not very common to work in that way because it's so challenging.
I mean, you went big. Go home or go, I mean, go big or go home. I just couldn't,
And then go big.
and
That's
then
what
go
I
big again. Yeah.
did.
I mean, you're such an inspiration.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I also know that you just switched studios. You're moving, and so that's a headache in itself. But while you were packing up and stuff, I want to talk a little bit about where you are in your career and like your legacy? Like, are you thinking about your legacy in that way, especially because you just packed up all your gear?
Yeah. It's funny, we were talking about Judy earlier, and Judy is really good at talking to artists about their legacy because, particularly she's so sensitive to the concept of female erasure
Yeah,
and how often it is, and I hope that this is not still a force at play, but I have a feeling that it kind of is, which is that we kind of go, "Oh, yay, look at us. We supported this female artist," and then pat pat pat, that's enough, bye,
right.
and sort of back to the status quo of like the artists that are actually making real money, getting large scale projects, so on, are like still kind of evening out to be this kind of like incredibly large proportion of men. And so Judy, she's like, you gotta keep your archive. No one else is doing this for you. You gotta make sure that these things are recorded and that they're available for people to study, because this is part of your legacy. And I admit I have not been as good at it as I would like to. But I have really loved, I have loved her thinking about that and helping me think about that. And the thing is, like, as artists, we're so busy in the creation. It's so
Yeah.
hard to look back, looking back. Um, but I will say that I did, you know, over actually the last 10 years, I did do quite a lot of kind of like of sort of capsulizing the sort of street years and a lot of these years, because I could feel this really tectonic shift happening within me, which is where I'm at now, where I'm kind of delving deep into these kind of narrative worlds. And I'm finding that the shift is kind of bigger than even those moments in the past where I was, working on, making a community space in an abandoned church, even though that feels so different than a block print, somehow where I'm at now with writing and creating narrative worlds feels even larger of a shift. It feels truly kind of uh like a real rotation of self in some way. And so yeah, and kind of in advance of that, I did a lot of kind of, setting certain like exhibitions into place. And so, for example, there was just an exhibition at the Taubman Museum a little over a year ago that was essentially a kind of a retrospective show that started from the Canyon, which was a 2017 show at the CAC. So there is starting to be like a body of work that kind of can travel and that represents this kind of last 20 years of my work.
Awesome. I mean, I'm so grateful that Judy keeps preaching what she had to do because that's best way for preservation. And um, yeah, just remembering that all these museums are part of cultural history. So you and your legacy, that's a public benefit. You're keeping street art alive, or you're keeping environmental issues alive for the public benefit, which can be huge for your legacy.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's there's so many different, if you're an artist and you're working over a lifetime,
Yeah.
there are so many different ways that you're going to speak to culture and interact with the issues of your time. I mean, think about it. This is 20 years now, and I feel like I'm just getting started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, think of Judy, right? She's been working for 60 years at least, right? Like, you're intersecting with generations. And so yeah, thinking about how do you preserve that it's so interesting. I mean, and I'm thinking a lot lately also just about how art communicates with people and how it
Yeah.
continues to shift over time. Street art for me was always about kind of reaching people on the city streets, just being like, we're here. And similarly with the rafts or with the community building projects, it was always about kind of showing up and being like, I'm going to meet you where you are. And so I'm thinking about that a lot with my new work as well. Um, Even to the extent that, like, I did a reading with eighth graders like a couple months ago that blew my mind, and I was like, oh my God, how are these kids getting art? And thinking about video games and thinking about film, and just thinking about the different ways that like art really like lives in our lives is something that's always been so interesting for me.
I guess I didn't realize how much work you did with children.
I don't. I've
Okay.
never.
Oh,
It's
okay.
really new. This is what I'm saying. I've never wondered. I mean, I've done a little work with like teenagers, but I've never like when I did the reading with the eighth graders, it was so mind blowing because it was the first class that I read to, which actually there's an animator who's is a stop motion animator, Jennifer. I'll show you also her work is incredible. But so she is a friend of mine and she is the teacher, an art teacher at the school. And so she kind of rallied this group together and they were like the literary students.
Okay.
So these were like these were like our these were us when we were kids,
Yeah.
basically. So when I met them, it was just like so powerful and the way they tuned in and the way they listened and I had never had that impulse before where I was like, I want to make art for 13-year-olds.
Right.
Like, like truly like what is their art? How do they identify with it? How do they be like, this is my special thing? That's like just a thought. Even though street art has always been like something that really appealed to kids, this was the first time that I was ever like, oh, I'm thinking about how do you receive art? How do you connect to it? What does it mean to you? How does it impact your life? I was just thinking about it in such a different way.
Yeah. I can see that now. I've worked in education programs at museums, and yeah, I can see why they could bring in tours of all the museum sciences, actually, the science of museology too, is showcasing a story with your visual artwork, but then that can be impacted through educational resources in each one of those museums. Huge,
Definitely.
huge.
Definitely. No, that's actually something I really love. And that like the Taubman, for example, was so great at, or even, the Brooklyn Museum, that show was a different kind of a show. But that's been such a joy is like watching how museums unpack the kind of deeper themes within the work, even in ways even that I haven't even done, in ways that really add to the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Art's such a great communication tool, and there's so many different types of learners out there. So
Yes.
I'm
Oh,
glad. Yeah.
isn't it great that we're like finally catching up to that? I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone that's got to go around and touch everything, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I love having you here. And before we go, girl, you're like besties with Alicia Keys. How has that collaboration been? I mean, how fun. It just looks like y'all are making things happen in
Um,
such a great
Yeah,
way.
I mean, I like I wouldn't necessarily say besties, although I love her so much and I will hang out with her anytime. Like I adore her. But I'm just like I don't want to claim that. But no, but I do love her so much and I love Swiss so much and they yeah, I mean, I've known them for over a decade now and they are, people who the thing that I love so much about Alicia is that she is who she shows herself to be. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we always wonder about people who are in this like mega sphere is like, they're if they're projecting care and spirituality and artistic truth, like is that what they're doing in their daily lives? And that's what I find with Alicia that is so beautiful and blows my mind is just the way that she is that she lives that and so I think that's why you see her tapping the collaborations that she does and that's why they're so involved artistically because they are true artists and they're such a true artist family.
Yeah.
um and so yeah, working with her actually it was right before the pandemic. Yeah, working with her on her video, like getting to paint a portrait of her was really wild and like difficult, honestly, like to paint such a well-known and beautiful face. That was like not intimidating in the slightest. Um and yeah, just to sort of honestly, yeah, like to try to like keep reminding each other that like in all I don't know, just like of our own kind of artistic excellence is I feel like one of the things that that relationship really does for me is like is she has this way of just like pulling people up and being like, don't forget you're a fucking genius. And
Yes.
it's like it's
Yes.
so beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that that's what she's really like in person too, besides just the optics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So neat. Well, we've talked about art moms, art grandmas, art daughters. Thank you, art sister. I
Mhm.
think when I took that workshop with you, it reminded me of my story that I wasn't telling and that
Mm,
I wasn't I was much more spiritual, actually, is what really came out of that workshop that I did with you.
interesting that you were sort of, you had some spirituality that you were uncomfortable expressing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And how did that, what were your steps there?
My steps were the joy that I found first, like that sense of feeling. So I was like, what's the feeling? Surprise was the
Mhm.
next one.
Mhm.
And then, like, oh, yeah, I am dynamic. I don't just have to be one type of art person in the art world.
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
excuse me, I can be all of me. And
Yes.
and here we are with Female Frequency Podcast because
Yeah, congratulations.
thank you. Because there is that first dot of creation. There is that spark, and it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. We'll keep creating in the world. We love you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me today. This was a really, really, I learned a lot through sharing, so I appreciate it.
It makes me feel so good.